Episode 230, Turning Conflict into Connection with Jill Freestone.
Welcome to Latter-day Life Coaches, the podcast where each episode is a conversation between me, Heather Rackham, and one of my amazing coach colleagues. Each coach here is a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and a highly trained, experienced life coach making a great impact in the lives of their clients. And together, we have one main goal, helping you live your best life no matter what. You ready for this conversation with a coach? Here we go.
In this follow-up episode, Heather sits down again with Jill Freestone, an anxiety and emotion coach and somatic experiencing practitioner, to go even deeper into the emotion of anger. They focus on how anger shows up in family dynamics, especially between parents and children, and how we can change our relationship with this often misunderstood emotion. Jill helps us reframe anger not as a problem, but as a powerful messenger with healing potential. Whether you're navigating big emotions in your kids, teens, or even in yourself, this conversation is packed with insights, tools, and heartfelt stories that show how anger can actually be a doorway to connection and safety. Please enjoy.
Well, welcome back, everybody. This has been a two-part series because when there's a lot to say, you can't just pack it all into one podcast episode. So Jill and I are back for another episode talking about anger. But before we get started, in case you're just catching this episode without listening to the first one, I would suggest going back to listening to the first one. If you are like, nope, I'm just going to listen to this one, I'm going to have Jill introduce herself again, just because. So Jill, first of all, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Good.
A little
Good.
bit sick, and that's
Yeah. Even though these are back to back, we did not record them back to back. So so Jill has a little bit of a cold this week, and hopefully she can make it through. But Jill, introduce yourself for us if you don't mind.
All right, thank you. So I am an anxiety and emotion coach, and mainly it turns out to be anger and anxiety is the big emotions that I focus on, and I help people in families where the emotion is causing conflict in relationships. And so I coach kids, teens, just adults by themselves or family groups. And I also am a somatic experiencing practitioner, and so using body-based methods to process trauma.
Awesome. Thank you. There's a lot of big words in there. And I'm thinking a lot of those we'll talk through a little bit today. And people are like, oh, I don't know. Maybe I need to listen just so I can understand.
Yeah, later on, I was going to explain more about the somatic experiencing. So we'll get there.
Yep, we'll get there. Awesome. Okay. So in the previous episode, we did talk about anger and how you defined anger, but maybe you could do that again for us really quick.
Yeah. So anger for me, the way that I was able to finally make some traction with it and remove shame was to do this separation that I didn't make up myself. I learned this from a lot of people, is that anger is the physical sensation in your body. And that's it. That's what anger is. And so I called it an emotion or a feeling, but it can come from angry thoughts. It could invite you or pull you to take angry actions, but those are not anger. Again, they're angry thoughts and angry actions. And anger can come spontaneously without a thought, that like a stress response, an automatic trauma response, or a learned response that is actually beneficial. And so the problem lies when we say you always have control over your anger and should never get angry, which that is actually false and inhuman, and actually inhumane. We want to feel angry. So then there's the processing of the anger when we're allowing it to move, that energy to move through the body. And then there's the mindset part where we're going through the thoughts and choosing what to do with those thoughts, and then what to do with the actions. And then after you process all of that, there's the regulating the nervous system back down and the calming down. And what happens is that most people rush too soon. As soon as anger shows up, to gotta calm down, gotta ground, gotta be nice, got to be good, got to be. And if you do that too soon, we miss the information and the healing that's possible from anger.
Mm. I love that you said we miss the information, because that really is what it is, right? We make it into this big, huge thing when really it's just a signal. It's just trying to inform us, instruct us,
Yeah.
help us see something that maybe needs to be healed. Just a side note, this was something I've kind of thought about since we last recorded. Do you think certain people are just more prone to feeling angry, or is it a learned thing? I don't know. I'm just curious what your
Yeah,
thoughts
there's
are on that.
definitely nature nurture in there. Like in your DNA, you are like more people have deeper, more intense emotions. Like
Mm,
they actually go deeper or higher, whatever you want to think about that.
right.
And other people, their depth of emotional reaction is smaller. And so the people have those bigger ones, that's a strength and a weakness. And the other people that have small, that's also a strength and a weakness. And so
Hmm.
thankfully my husband and I are the opposite. And so that we can support each other in those ways, and that I can bring the depth and he can bring the lack of explosiveness. And it's very helpful. So there's that part that's just in your DNA, but there's the nurture part of your environment that you grew up in, and what kind of stresses or traumas were just in your environment. Like if you are in or were in an environment that is in this higher stimulation, the noise, the senses, the sensory, the busyness, how much is going on, like working in an environment, if you're an older person, that's just plain noisy and fast, like all of that can lead to your fuse being short, versus if you lay on a beach all day and you're just writing books, right? Like there's going to be a difference in your nervous system.
Mm. Thank you for, I think, giving some more clarity on that. I just have thought about that a lot. I'm thinking on the flip side, if you are a person who experiences, like you said, like you're more prone to bigger emotions, that also means that you get the joy of feeling things at a much more
Yeah,
like enjoyable feelings, I guess I should say,
expansive.
at a
Yeah.
much there's payoffs, I guess, is what I'm saying, right? Like
Well,
you
and not
feel,
just on the joy side, like I can grieve with people and raise
yeah.
people in a way that we connect deeper.
Hmm.
The shorter fuse doesn't get to tip into that, but it's
Yeah.
exhausting too,
Yeah.
which is a part why I'm sick today. Is that there's been a lot of deep stuff going on this last week in a lot of different areas of my life, and yeah, I have to take
Yeah,
care of
you're feeling it.
myself.
I always think that I don't feel a lot of range of emotion.
And
Like,
that's again, it's a strength too.
and and so yes, I have been able to see like pros to that, but I've also been, like I also see it kind of as a weakness as well. Like, oh, I don't like that I am not feeling what other people seem to feel when they're in a situation like this. I don't know. So just I guess I'm sidetracking for some own
No, that's
personal
totally
clarity
okay.
here.
And there are days where I am feeling like you, like, oh, I feel like this is a weakness to me. And so it's both. And so it's that level of acceptance of this is who I am, and getting to that place of acceptance, and what can I do when I notice something big coming on so that I take care of myself. And like I made some choices over this last week to keep going even though things were intense. Normally I notice and I rest and I take care of, or I choose I'm not going to step into that even though I want to. I'm going to hold back because I know how big the emotion will be for me. So there's that kind of learning how to adapt. And like for someone like you, there could be this learning to tap into some of these things. It's a learned practice, right? That things might
Mhm.
be able to be deeper and richer. And that's something I've done with clients as well, to try and stretch that if they want to. But at the same
Mhm.
time, instead of feeling like I am a problem in some way, of just okay,
Right.
it has both. But it's hard sometimes
Yeah,
to be in
yeah,
that acceptance of self and the beauty of my strengths.
yeah. That's true. The acceptance of ourselves,
Yeah.
regardless,
Yeah.
like
Or
you're
did.
different, I'm different. Like we just get to accept that and use it in ways that are beneficial to
Yeah.
us
Yeah.
and figure out how to access it. Okay.
For sure. And like I said, I depend on the way my husband is. And if we
Hmm.
were both the same, wow, like the fireworks and the conflict that could be going on, but there isn't because we have that balance. And then the depth of what he's learning, right? Like it's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Yeah. So
fantastic.
don't put yourself down. But like I said, it's a tendency we all have. It's
Yeah.
normal. So
Yeah.
I think one thing that in this class today, this podcast is more of a focus on the family, where last time was on, some of women's issues and individual. I think the thing that helps people, especially parents that are struggling with their own anger with their kids or with their kid or their teen's anger. And for me to switch and say this to them, that the moments of greatest connection with your kids can actually be in these big emotions.
Yeah.
Is a big, it's a hard thing to accept, to believe that once you really deeply believe that, like all of our shame and our fear, it just turns into like big emotion. It's go time. Like I'm here. I'm ready to show up because I got the skills. And so just that thing of this is really not a problem. This is normal. This is useful. This is my moment to be right here. And so the people come to me often thinking that the emotion is the problem. And that's why, like I'm the big emotion coach. And they're like, yes, yes. But then I help them to see that the emotion is rarely the problem, but it's our relationship with the emotion. And so that just shifts everything. So that's part of what we're going to talk about today. And really how to, in the moment, understand how to support your own emotions and to support them so that we can actually be there in the moment. Because if we're off, in our emotions, then we can't be there with him and we make it worse. And so that's why there's that beauty of your shorter depth that would help you to be able to do that.
Yeah. I'm finding it really fascinating because you're saying, it's our relationship with the emotion that's not that's the problem, right? Like it's the relationship we have that becomes a problem. But I think it's the relationship we have with that emotion that then affects our other relationships, right? So it's both relational.
Yes.
And I don't know, I love seeing connections like that. And my
Yes.
mind's like, oh,
Yeah. Yeah. For me, relationships are so big in all those different ways. Yeah.
yeah.
This was just part of the introduction part, but there's this quote from Harriet Lerner, a different one than last time, but she said that family relationships are the most influential in our lives and the most difficult. And when we can learn to use our anger energy to get unstuck in our closet and stickiest relationships, meaning like in ourself, in our own issues, we will begin to move with greater clarity, control, and calm in every relationship. And so it's like this family is the workshop, is the place to be able to do that.
I can't help but think of the primary song that I love, that's God gave us families to
Totally.
help us become. I mean, like in every aspect, right? He's given us families because it's in a family that we have to work through these big emotions that we're almost forced to if we
We're
want.
stuck with each
Yeah,
other.
yeah. I
Well,
just think it's a brilliant plan, obviously.
and it's really hard. It's really, really hard.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So the big emotions also, though, can be a sign of a deeper issue like undiagnosed anxiety, depression, OCD, autism, sensory processing, ADHD, like trauma, all those things. And so also just wanting to say that, like, as I give this information and I do consider neurodivergence and try to offer all these different things, if you've already tried these things or you just know like that's not going to work for me and my kid, please don't think that something's wrong with you or your kid. Like that means we need a different tool, a different adaptation. And like nothing is wrong and broken. And I always like to share that because I felt that way with myself, with my anger and with my child and needing to find slight pivots and different methods. So yeah.
I think we addressed even that a little bit in the last episode, that there are so many different ways, so many different modalities, so many different type of personalities as professional helpers, right? That you do have to, there can be some effort required in getting the right sort of help. So don't give up, keep looking and find what works.
Yeah, so many years of suffering here at my side.
Oh gosh.
Relationship with anger, there's a scale that I like to talk about, like you're at shame or fear and like total rejection of it and resistance, and then you're just tolerating it, and you move into actually allowing it, and then really accepting, and then even embracing it. And so then if you think about that, where am I in relation to anger as a concept? Like, what about the physical sensations of anger? What about thoughts? What about actions? And so when you switch to really believing that they're messengers and that they're just purely giving us information, then your tolerance can shift a little bit. And then you have to just look at each situation, each aspect of anger, and start to see why it's there. And so then we spend a lot of time, just looking at that spectrum and understanding that, like I said earlier, that anger is something we actually want, that's useful. And I gave this example last time, but I think it's helpful to think of that if you're standing next to someone who's hurting someone you love, verbally, physically, emotionally, however, and if anger is bad, then you don't feel anger there. If it's a problem, shameful, it's a sin. So then your choice is to feel happy, because we should be happy all the time, right? And so then you're feeling happy, you're smiling, you're feeling calm and content while this is happening to your loved one. And that right there, that doesn't feel good, that doesn't connect. And so that helps us to see that actually we want to feel anger. So when it shows up, wait, I want this. Choose this, and I'm going to use this as fuel, as a vehicle to take me where I want to go.
Mm-hmm. It's being in control of it rather than being at the mercy of.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which you can do when you actually accept and embrace it, instead of like, you're like, I shouldn't be doing this.
So why do you think that anger has become such a challenging emotion for us in general? I just think it hasn't probably always been that way. I mean, but I'm curious what
Yeah, that's true. I've done a lot of research on anger, but not the history yet. So that's my next, I'm like, oh. Yeah. But part of it, I've done some looking into what we're just told socially. Mm-hmm. And the next episode on anger we're going to do is about what we learn in religion. And I'm excited about that one. But this one is just more culturally. But there's a lot of quotes that I found that assume that we have no ability to choose, which is what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. And so then that's why anger is so scary and shameful. Like, why would you want to go there if it's just you're out of control? And then the quotes really shame anger, saying that it's bad itself and that the actions are bad. And they lump all those different aspects of anger together. So then we're going to shame ourselves for a necessary emotion. So a couple of those quotes, like this is Benjamin Franklin, and he says, whatever is begun in anger ends in shame. Like complete black and white statement. Mm-hmm. But there's so many of these that we've had in all of our literature, and in, you'll just start to notice them now as you read them and we talk about it. This is Elizabeth Kenny, and it says, he who angers you conquers you, and you're like, oh, that's great. Like, all right, I won't be conquered. But when you think about what this means, is like, you have no power. And right. Anger dwells only in the bosom of fools, Albert Einstein. Okay, well, let's not do anger then. I'm not going to be a fool. Louis L'Amour says, anger is a killing thing. Ooh, it kills the man who angers. For each rage leaves him less than he had been before. It takes something from him. That's terrifying. Mm-hmm. But it's true. Anger can lead someone to kill. It can take something from you. But again, it's all or nothing, and what you do with anger and how you see it, and agency. Like if we bring in the religious side of it, like we really do have agency here, but these quotes don't sound like it.
Would it be more accurate then if we could go back and rewrite these things
Totally.
to say like unchecked anger, or not knowing how to really use our anger is what is the cause then? I mean, I think you could just replace that, or I don't know.
Totally. Part of what you're hearing here is that when we just call anger all the different types of things, mm-hmm. lump it all together, that's when we have a problem. And when we believe it's all bad, then we have no way to work with it. But if we say angry thoughts is what I meant to say.
Yeah.
Angry thoughts could lead you to, kill or to take something from you or to conquer you.
Yeah.
But the
It's not the
angry,
feeling, it's
not
what
the
you do with the feeling.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. And so the
Gotcha.
one about dwelling in the bosom of fools, like anger dwells in every human. A fool might allow it to stay unnecessarily and like what's the word, to like pollute their heart, by choosing to be angry about things for way too long. Like that would be a foolish thing to do.
Yeah, for
Yeah. And
sure.
like the last one was Mark Twain, and it says, anger is an acid that can do more harm to the vessel in which it is stored than to anything on which it is poured. Yes, that's true. Like I just said, if
Yeah.
you're unaware of what it's doing to you and you're just letting it rage and spin and become bigger and bigger and bigger. So, yeah, it's more about, like we said, the relationship with anger and then knowing what it is. And like it really is the most useful and the most misunderstood and feared emotion. And I think that's where it's helpful for us to
Yeah.
just separate it all out.
So I'm curious then, what helped you learn to transform your relationship with anger? What led to that? Or what did you even do? Because
Yeah.
I imagine there's really not a lot of resources that even kind of look at it from that perspective because we are
Well,
so inundated with it's just
yeah.
bad.
Yeah, I thought so. And actually there's a lot the more I look, but you have to look.
Hmm.
But this was back, oh, what year would that have been? 15 years ago, maybe? When my oldest was a preteen, and we'd been butting heads for years and years and years. And I didn't think there was, like, I was thinking this way about anger in the unhealthy way. And I was embarrassed about me yelling and back and forth and the anger and the explosiveness. And I knew it was damaging the relationship, but I had no options, right? There was nothing I could do about it.
Right.
I'd
You
been
thought.
I'd been doing all the spiritual things. I'd been asking for help. I've been trying, and nothing was happening. So I just started looking every direction I could. My body was having a lot of chronic health problems that were also leading me to look at all the options, and I wasn't finding answers for my body either. And so that turned me towards to mindfulness meditation by a Buddhist teacher. And like the fact that I found one in Utah Valley was surprising, but I did these 8-week classes and then multiple times, and then did some silent all day retreats, and just learning how to slow everything down, like, and just be in my body. And that's all we were doing. So like I meditated 45 minutes a day each time. And like I just made that my priority because it felt like not quite life and death, but like my body was having all these pains and problems, and my relationship was having all those problems. Like I was desperate. It's like, I'm going to carve out this time and try and do this. But gradually, what happened is I started to actually feel the physical sensations before I reacted. And I actually got to know the physical sensations very clearly. And I learned how to just watch them and see what they're doing. And so there's the sitting meditation or the walking meditation or eating or a gentle yoga. And it just actually started to separate and create some space between stimulus and response. And so that the anger that felt automatic and out of control, I started to have some agency come back. And that's literally what it felt like. And I remember having this pause when I was about to yell to my daughter and feeling all the sensations in my body and noticing her face and her and I didn't know about nervous system back then, but noticing what was happening in our energy and in our states and everything, and then having that little window open up and choosing differently. like just I had no idea that was going to happen. I thought like that it was going to really just mostly, I went for my health. I didn't think there would be anything that could help my anger.
Mm-hmm.
But it also took away nausea at 24/7 for months. And that was connected to undiagnosed anxiety and doing too much, running too fast. So it was interesting of feeling like so helpless and hopeless then, and like connecting to my body and actually respecting my body and like getting out of my head. Because that's what a lot of it is noticing thoughts and coming back to the body, noticing outside sounds, coming back to the body. And it's just a very simple notice, return, notice, return. And that just allowed me in my regular life to notice, return, and then choose. And so it's often too, when we're in this elevated state all day long, that we don't notice these things. And so we have these automatic quick reactions. And then I also did therapy and medication and later had diagnoses that helped make things make sense. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing about this is that even if you do this work and learn all these coping skills, it's not going to help if you still think anger is bad or sinful. So like bringing that back together. And like, that's also why like the parenting books that I was reading, pre-internet, and like trying all the anger management books and the coping skills, that's a big part of why it wasn't working either, because I wasn't connected here and I still had that belief. I think that also in that time, my confidence increased, which I didn't know I had lost, through postpartum depression and little babies and like putting all of my focus into mothering. And I was a very confident person before. And that right there just really was a confidence increaser that like, wow, like I really can have this ability to pause and choose, which I really thought there was no hope for. Right. So that really, it came from understanding the emotion. And I did a lot of reading later that I found other people who teach about this, but it was a unexpected situation. But now teaching that when we understand the emotion and we completely embrace the emotion, and whoever is feeling it with curiosity and compassion, like that's what you're learning, what I learned in the meditation, like the curiosity and compassion are like major pillars of Buddhism, meditation. So then if you're doing that, you're in that state, then you realize that the child's nervous system or the child's body is the manual that we wish kids came with. And so like we're actually aware of and attuned, like I said, like looking at the face, looking at the eyes, what's the body doing? What's the tone of voice? And am I willing in that moment to adapt to that, get my place in my body into a place that I can co-regulate with them, or I'll go and self-regulate myself and then come back, or help them get to the place that they can self-regulate, meaning a different location if we're both kind of volatile. So then we're paying attention to the body responding to the environment, and we're really respecting the body's needs and signals instead of disconnecting from the body or hinting to the children that like you shouldn't heed your body's signals. And we do that a lot when we say, you can't be that hungry, you just had a snack. Or it's just a small scratch, it shouldn't hurt. Or don't cry, it's not a big deal. Don't worry, it's only one shot, you're gonna be fine. And like those kind of statements happen all the time when we're trying to help them feel better. But at the same time, it completely diminishes their personal awareness of what their body is telling them. And we want them attuned to that. Like we really want them to listen and heed and pay attention instead of shove that down, don't listen to it. They're like, no, I really feel hungry. No, this actually hurts. It is a big deal to me. And so in that moment, instead, it would be this, tell me about that. How does that feel? I'm so proud of you for listening and telling me about that. And then choosing what to do. Like, obviously, if they're telling you that every 2 minutes all night long that they need a drink, we're going to talk about that.
Right. As I'm listening to this, did he share this? Obviously, these are like things that we can do to help support our kids and our teens in their anger, right? Like these are just kind of some of those things. Obviously things are what they are and we can't go back and change the past, but some of my biggest quote unquote regrets as a parent now looking back have to do with my inability to teach at least one of my children in particular how to deal with the anger that I think that was experienced more than my other kids with this particular one. And I wish now that I had skills that I'm learning to, I'm just curious what would have been different. And obviously I feel like life is perfect and we've learned the things that we need to learn, both that child and myself. But I just am always curious what could have possibly been,
and that was kind of a pivot point in our family where we raised them one way and then we just did a 180 and raised them a different way the rest of their time. And it was quite fascinating. So and I go back to my parents, into my early years of parenting, and have compassion because we did not have information or skills.
Right. And it is true. Like this particular child will also say that they remember like pretty precisely when my methods
When
and
you
my
switch.
way of parenting kind of changed.
Totally.
So anyway,
And doesn't that give them permission to change themselves and to
yes,
have
that's
grace for
true.
themselves? I really, really love that. The Gottmans talk about this a lot, that they have a ratio that has gone through changes, but it's more than half of the time you need to mess up, because
Mhm.
the repair is where you actually connect. Like I was saying, in the moments of
Right.
problems, that's where you actually heal and connect and become a safe relationship. And also, if you're always doing it right, that helps. It creates confusion for the kid because they're not like that. And so they're messing up and they're looking at this robotic, perfect parent. And they're then feeling shame and confusion and don't know how, when they mess up, to what to do with their emotions. So that's why a big part of what I teach is helping parents to talk out loud and model and show what they do with their emotions. Because if the parents aren't doing that, it's really hard to make progress with the kid.
Hmm. I'm thinking like in particularly with this child, like it was not safe for them to be angry. And
Yeah,
there were punishments for having big emotions. And
totally.
maybe more of the punishments were like you have to, like go to your room until you can,
Totally.
those sorts of things. And I don't know, I'm probably not, that's probably not unique to me, but I
No,
just
no,
know
you're
that,
completely normal.
yeah. But anyway, I just think it's so fascinating that,
Yeah, and we didn't understand that doing that taught them to shame their anger and themselves, and to not know what to do with it. So we just shove it down, and we just didn't know that. And I was
yeah,
doing the same thing with myself too, like not communicating with my husband about anger. And so we're just building resentment. Like,
yeah.
helpful.
It's so fun. It's so fun because it's like resentment on all sides, right? Resentment with your kids, resentment with your spouse, resentment with yourself. It's like you just create it
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah. So when we suggest to them that they should ignore their body's feelings by indirectly, right? We're doing
Mhm.
this,
Right.
that we devalue the very signals they need to pay attention to self-regulate and prevent big explosions. So like it just completely, backfires on us. And so instead we want to try to convince a child that everything, like what we do, this is the bad method, is trying to convince them everything's okay when it's really not. And we're dismissing their reality of what's actually happening. Like that becomes really confusing, but that's how I was raised. That's how I spent my first half of parenting. And it's actually really necessary too when the body's signal of safety is registering threat enough that they're safe or not safe. And so like we can run into problems where there too, with abuse or like smaller levels of threat. Like they're not able to detect that even or know what to do. And so it's really modeling respect for the foundation of our basic feelings and body. Like this gift that we have from God. Like this body is talking to me and I want to listen to it and take care of it. So that really shifts things.
Hmm. I think it'd be helpful maybe for people to maybe hear some more specific suggestions of how to walk through with our kids when they are in the middle of an emotion like this.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if your kids are smaller and even teenagers, it's kind of fun to talk to them about these emotions. And like there's a song by Mr. Rogers that says, "What do you do with the mad that you feel?" And I'll read some of these, and you can listen to the song as well. But I think talking through this, it helps talk about why anger is great and then what to do actually.
What do you do with the mad that you feel when you feel so mad you could bite? When the whole wide world seems oh so wrong and nothing you do seems very right.
If I read some of these words, it says, "What do you do with the mad that you feel?" And he's got this real peppy, "What do you do with the mad that you feel when you feel so mad you could bite? When the whole wide world seems oh so wrong and nothing you do seems right. What do you do? Do you punch a bag? Do you pound some clay or some dough? Do you round up some friends for a game of tag and see how fast you can go?" So right there, like he was way ahead of his time with emotional
Oh,
intelligence.
with everything, really. Mr.
Everything,
Rogers was a gift.
right? So amazing. And so like just pulling this out and just have it a discussion about it and saying, what do you think about this? And just like a discussion like we've been having too, like, what do you think about mad? And I have people of all ages get out crayons and color what mad looks like and what it feels like, and let their bodies move and what anger feels like in their body. Like that's where the drum circles that I do too. Like what do you do when you feel this? How could you draw it? What sounds would anger make? What movements does anger do? And here's some ideas, like he's saying in the song. Let's make a list of all these ideas that you feel anger leading you to do, instead of, oh, don't do anything. No, anger makes me want to punch. Like, that's great. Like, if I had a dangerous situation, I want to be able to punch, but let's choose. Mm-hmm. And so then he says, it's great to be able to stop when you've planned a thing that's wrong and be able to do something instead and think this song. I can stop when I want to. I can stop when I wish. I can stop anytime. And what a good feeling to feel like this and know that the feeling is really mine. Know that there's something deep inside that helps us become what we can. For a girl can someday become a woman, and a boy someday a man.
I can stop when I want to, can stop when I wish, can stop anytime. And what a good feeling to feel like this and know that the feeling is really mine.
So that I can stop anytime, like building that belief and that capacity. Mm-hmm. And it's a good feeling that's really mine. Like that's a big shift, right?
Yeah. Huge. I feel like you should have changed your sweater and your shoes before you shared that little segment with us.
Went a little bit off. If I had a cardigan, yeah. Oh, I should have. I have one around the corner.
Oh man, yep. I love that. And as you probably never thought you'd be singing on a podcast before, but there you were singing. I can totally remember that. And
yeah, you can see his face too, right?
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Yeah, awesome. We can put the little link in if we don't get the audio in. It's just to see his face and everything about that. So the first thing is what we've talked about, all of this, the relationship with the emotion, and to be able to just talk openly in your family about it, to make it normal to talk about the different aspects of anger and all emotions and removing shame, and really, really, really believing that the emotion is not a problem to fix. It is a feeling to allow. And the behavior is the least effective and the least important thing to focus on. So
I feel like we should say that one more time. The behavior is the least effective and important thing to focus on.
Yeah, it's the least important. And it's not effective. So the behavior's out there loud and causing broken things, and it's disrespectful and it's mean, whatever. And that's what's yelling for our attention. But we literally need to set that aside, just like in meditation, where I'm like, oh, there it is out there screaming for my attention. And I return to the body. Oh, tight jaw, tight neck, heartbeat, clenched fists. And I notice it in my body. And I notice the kid. What's the kid doing? What's the body doing? And so in that moment, if we can remember that there are no punishments for the emotion itself. And what happens is we usually lump it all together. You're angry, go to timeout. You're angry, do X, Y, and Z for your punishment. But we've got to be so clear in that moment to say, I see you're angry. Of whatever words you've talked about, because some kids, if you say it looks like you're angry, they're going to be mad if you say that. Right. So you have to practice and talk about what words are okay for me to say when you're flipped your lid. Right. But to notice and say, it is okay to be angry. Do you want to yell with me together? Should we go play basketball? Should we go run? And usually you have these predetermined things that are okay. And still sometimes when you suggest these things in the moment, because our lids are flipped, meaning that we don't have access to our prefrontal cortex and the amygdala is running the show, they still might resist or refuse or try to battle with you. And that's normal. But in that moment, you're not taking offense. You know what's going on in their body. And so if it's a small child, you may bring their blanket, you may pick them up, or you may literally start singing or start doing something that is comforting next to them. You're modeling, you're doing whatever, but you've talked about it. If they're causing harm to someone else, then you'll remove the other people. If they're a teenager, you can't pick them up and move them. And so you just label, it's okay to feel what you're feeling right now. I'm glad you're feeling angry about this. And then say, if we need to, this behavior is not okay. We're doing this separation or movement because of the action, but your anger is beautiful. And so like reiterating that in the moment and afterwards when we talk about the behavior, because we're gonna talk about the behavior, but never in that moment, because their lid is flipped. They have no access to the prefrontal cortex anyway, and you're not going to get anywhere talking about this. We want to help their brain come back online. We want them to feel acceptance about themselves and about their own emotion. They want to feel safe with you. Like that's where you're just connecting deeply. When you're feeling out of control and someone sees you and accepts you in that moment and loves you because of your humanness, like, oh, like that is just beautiful, safe depth. So that right there. And so the things we want to notice, like there's lists of things that are good to say and bad to say. And sometimes it's really hard to remember those things. So that's why it's kind of giving like this framework. But the things like, stop making me mad. You're making mom angry. Don't do that. You're going to make me angry. You're upsetting me. You need to stop doing this or I'll get upset. Like, in life coaching, we've learned the problem of that, but also in the moment of really checking those automatic phrases that you've heard all your life and you hear other people say, of taking responsibility for your own emotions and not putting that weight on them, or don't make your brother mad, just like, oh, I can see, it looks like, are you feeling, would you like to do this right now? Like, instead of stop hitting your brother, like, would you like to go outside and play catch with me? Just this simple wait till the brain comes back online instead of stop.
Yeah. Yeah. And you alluded to, these are things that we've learned with life coaching, meaning things like when we say that it's going to be somebody else's, like even giving airtime to the fact or the thought that somebody else can make you angry or that someone else can make you feel something is wrong, right? Like nobody has the control to make us do or feel anything. So I just wanted to just go back and throw that in there, because there's so much value just in that right there, in learning to say, changing how you say. And that was one of the biggest things with my kids is I no longer said, did they, are they hurting your feelings? Did they do something that made you angry? It was more of like,
how did you feel?
Yes.
What do you want to do about that?
Bringing it back to them versus like giving the power to somebody else.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So like in that moment when they're being annoying or they're doing something loud or they're saying no, whatever the situation is, instead of saying those things of you're making me, you're upsetting someone else, or stop it, or else, the threatening, I'm feeling really tense in my body and I feel like I'm going to be angry, or I'm already angry. I'm going to step outside and I'm going to walk a little bit. Like that saying out loud is huge. It's this, I'm normal. I'm feeling physically irritated by whatever, but I'm not saying you're a problem. I'm taking ownership. That loud noise, I'm feeling tense because of, and you don't even have to start labeling your horrible behavior. Just my body is tight and hot and I'm feeling, whatever word you want to use that your kid understands at that age, if it's older, dysregulated, or I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling upset, I'm feeling frustrated, I'm feeling stressed, I'm going to, or again, like, could we lay on the ground and pretend that we're bears in hibernation? Like something that actually works with a little kid, or like, we're going to turn on this music and we're going to do dancing, like something that will regulate your nervous system and maybe help theirs at the same time. Or if it's literally, here's a show, I'm going to go in the other room and literally need to scream a little bit. You're going to hear mom scream and it's like, I'm a bear, I'm a tiger. And when I'm angry, that's what I do. like that it's normal, right?
Yeah.
Like it's normal. Do you want to do it with me or do you want to stay here? Like, it's just completely normal. And so that communication about emotions, then I've seen little kids who've been raised like this just say, oh, I'm really angry. I'm going to, like my kids have babysat some kids that are raised like this. And he was like, I don't know, 5 or something. And he said, oh, I am really upset. I'm going to go upstairs. And he went up in his room and he can't remember what he was doing, but he was doing some things with his body and some other things he was reading. And then he came back and he's like, okay, I'm okay. I'm ready to play now. Like amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So just that kind of communication, that kind of modeling, that making it normal. And then you make commitments about what I will and won't do in the moment. And so even talking about that to your kids too, so that if they're like, why are you disengaging? Why are you going somewhere else? Like, I will not talk to you if I'm flooded. Like, if my emotions and my lid is flipped, I'm not going to speak. And that might feel hard to you, but this is how I'm respectful to you. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to say the things, and I'm not going to speak to you with my scary face. That to me is respectful. And I also won't listen to you when you're like that. We're going to pause and we're just going to take a time out. We're going to do the flip lid. And I'm going to ask you to do the same in that moment. And we're, like we said earlier, we're going to use and respect, we're going to use the knowledge we have about how it takes 20 to 30 minutes for most people to come back online. For women, it's usually a little shorter, but we're going to respect our body. That's what it does. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then have the willingness to come back another time to address it when we're both ready.
Yeah, so much respect there for everybody involved in the story, right? Like not just you, but your child, your spouse, whoever it is. I think it's just,
yeah,
it's just a beautiful thing when we can reframe and rephrase that way.
Yeah.
So real quick, I'm curious if you can connect for us a little bit of, like trauma and anger. And trauma is a word that we are hearing more and more about for good reason. I think we have a lot of study and learning to do in that area, but how are they connected, and what do we do about that?
Yeah. My mind was just going ahead thinking if I said anything. We talked about repair earlier with the Gottmans and how it's really important about coming back and repairing. So I don't know if we have to go to that, but I think the one thing I didn't say was about in that moment when I said that the behavior is the least effective and important thing to do. The thing right there is to think, don't problem solve right now.
Gotcha.
And so if you can like quickly validate, not problem solve. And so in the moment of, it's hard to be angry, it feels uncomfortable, right? Like it's uncomfortable, not like it's bad. Or if they're anxious, like, oh, it's sometimes scary to feel anxious. And this is hard to feel. So it's this validation of how they're feeling, even if their behavior is bad.
Okay. Yeah.
Because people think that like, if I start validating and like giving them love and attention when they're angry, they're going to do it more. No.
Right. Like I'm condoning their behavior if I do any of that.
And so the validation does not mean you accept or approve of the behavior. But always in the moment when the behavior is wrong, the behavior is just trying to get our attention. And so we pause that, set it aside, and we focus on validating and helping them feel safe, help us connect and feel safe with each other. And then we support them through it. So I just want to make sure I clarified that. With the trauma, this was one thing that I didn't realize either, that some of the ways that I was quickly responding was a trauma response in my needs to people please and to be good, to be so perfect and good and people pleasing, that if that's my response, that I'm trying to control everything all the time and to make sure everything's just right. And so if my child is not doing that standard either, and I'm trying to be, the perfect mom, and they're not complying, like there's this tension that is building. And then I have this fear, you have these fears that your brain makes up and believes from childhood that like something bad is going to happen if I'm not making this work. And it becomes this automatic thing. And so understanding that trauma, the definition used to be the bad things that happen to you. And those are still traumas, meaning like natural disasters or war or abuse. Those are still traumas. But instead of defining it by what's outside, we define it by what happens inside you. And that's what we call little t trauma versus capital T trauma. So trauma is what happens inside your body without someone to help you go through it and back down. So if there's what I was describing earlier is that I was right there with my kid when their body is feeling this intense emotion. And if I just tell them, don't be angry, shut it down, or you're a sinner for feeling angry, then what we're doing is they're getting stuck in that stress response. The stress response is getting angry is helpful. It leads us to take action. It's self-protective. And so what we're doing is we're getting this stuck point of not able to just feel the anger rise and fall down and complete. And that sounds, I don't know how it sounds to you, but a lot of people suddenly feel guilty and, oh no, I've ruined my child. And I felt the same way. And then I realized we can heal these. It's easy to heal. And it's a normal thing that is happening all the time. So thankfully, little t trauma is healable. So is capital T, but a lot longer. But the idea is that what we want to do is continue sitting with people in their emotions, creating that safety. And then their body learns that they can handle the difficult, uncomfortable physical sensations, no matter what's happening outside, and they can go up and come back down in their nervous system. So the quote by Peter Levine is, trauma is not what happens to us, but what we hold inside in the absence of an empathetic witness. So it's not what happens to you, but what happens inside you. So that's why two people can be in the same situation and have a trauma response, not the other one.
Yeah.
It's when we're not seen and we're not known. And especially highly sensitive children, they can have trauma not by bad things happening only, but also by good things not happening. And their emotional needs for attunement not being met. So I'm a highly sensitive person, didn't know that. And I have highly sensitive children too, especially. And so the way I was parenting with high control and high demand and rigid schedule, and that was not meeting their highly sensitive body's needs or my own. But I thought that's what was needed and what was right. And I was raised that way too. And so it was just kind of the thing. And so learning how to see it, know what to do, and understand that my people pleasing and perfectionism isn't something that I could think my way out of with coaching or therapy. It was something that I had to process in my body. And that's where the somatic experiencing comes in. And there's multiple ways to do this with the body and parts work that I also do. But that's where I felt some shame of like, so many people are just thinking their way through their anger problems and their perfectionism and their people pleasing and like life coaching, and they're just stopping. What's wrong with me? And it's because it was more than just a thought thing. It was in my body in deep years ago. So then I think sometimes when we're trying to avoid, the conflict and like suppress everyone else's emotions, like we build this up. And so that's where the somatic experiencing helps you to actually use your body to process instead of think through. And so that's helpful for some people that they don't have to talk through all of the things. We just find the stress response that's incomplete and complete it. And so that right there, it reduces the intensity and the frequency of the big emotions for some people without just having to practice. They're like, oh, I'm starting here instead of here. Like when I was talking about that stress response. So yeah, hopefully that makes a little bit more sense.
Yeah, it does. And I think, the somatic work there's so much to that in and of itself. And so much value and so many things that I think most of us don't even really understand there. So maybe sometime we could just even go deeper into that entirely, because I think we're just barely scratching the surface there. But
yeah, we could do it just on that.
Yeah, I know so many things, so much information there. But before we go, do you have any examples that you wanted to share with clients or personal examples?
Yeah. I think one personal would just be really quickly when I finally learned to say to my husband, like, I'm really angry at you right now and I can't talk and I'm going to do this. Like learning that is wise. And we both accept that.
Yeah.
And then just either in that moment or later check in, like, are we ready to talk about it or not? And like, that's just such a game changer.
Yeah.
I was helping a whole family. They would all get on Zoom and they were traveling around the world actually. And when they were in Europe, they would give this example of dad had to be on the call for business calls while they're driving through busy traffic, and he would explode in anger. And the kids are sitting in the back, just like trying to be normal kids, but then also like saying things and that would add to dad's anger, and they're like afraid of dad's explosion, but they're also just being normal kids.
Right.
So we get on the call and we talk through, and I have their permission to talk about this, letting each of the teenagers and the kids kind of voice how it felt, and the dad being very humble and respectful to hear and validate how they felt. And so like facilitating that conversation with them, and then working with the dad one-on-one to help him shift and figure out what his options are when he's feeling angry. And like, will I make new rules that I just literally can't handle being on a phone call with everyone in the family, so I'm going to pull over? Or when, you know, like, what are the things I'm going to do, and how can he notice when it's coming and either hang up or get everyone out of the car? You know, I'm going to drop you guys off, or like whatever we're going to do to come up with all these solutions to be able to communicate. But there was a lot of, we're all just like gritting and trying to make it through this and making everything worse, right?
Yeah.
But there was a lot of layers, you know, like there was the group dynamic, and then there's working with the dad to figure out like why he didn't quite understand why other people wouldn't operate in certain ways, you know, like, why can't you just respect him while I'm on the phone? Or why, you know, just like, and why is my anger so quick? So like that one is just a really good example. Another one was a teenager who had high anxiety, and that's why we were working on, but didn't realize that there was a bunch of anger underneath it about not being able to feel safe around her parents and tell her some really big things. And so she's living with high anxiety all the time, but underneath she's just really mad about these things that she can't tell. Oh, and we were trying to connect with the body, and some clients just aren't able to do that. And we couldn't figure out why, but she's like it's this ticking time bomb, like underneath, like so mad. Like, why would you want to connect with that? Like subconsciously, you wouldn't realize that. So she got in a wreck in a car one day, and like just the whole thing like stunned her body that she just started sobbing for like 3 hours, she said. And it allowed her to just release enough that she finally felt safer to be connecting with her body. So it's kind of unexpected like method. And then over time, we created some safety that she could talk to me finally about these things she couldn't tell her parents. So then she created this safety, talking about those things and figuring out, what are we going to do with this situation? How are we going to address this with the parents, and figuring those things out. So yeah, just a lot to look at, but also when it's not a problem, we can get there.
Right. Absolutely. I love that you said options when you were talking about the family, like helping him see what his options were, because that's truly what it comes down to for all of us. We have options. We think we only have one set thing, that how we can respond and react to those big emotions, but we have options. So I appreciate you sharing some of those with us.
Yeah. I think the last one I would share is this teen boy that was just explosive in he would say mean things and he would just explode really angry. And he didn't realize that that was hurtful to other people. And he really didn't think it was, because when he explodes, then he's just done with it.
Right.
He's moved on. He's fine. And the rest of the family is like left in the what's it called? The shrapnel, you know?
Yeah.
And so part of that was discussing with him to gain more empathy for how others feel. And he also really resisted when his parents were trying to get him to stop what he's doing in the moment. So helping the parents to realize that when he's angry, there's nothing that's helpful right then. And so helping him to, you know, go take a shower, go play basketball, to help separate and then work through it behind the scenes. So just a little example of that, trying to kind of find out what the missing piece is.
I think we can, you know, through all those examples, one of them somewhere is going to be relatable to everybody, because we've all experienced something, whether with ourselves or in relationships around us, that have something similar in them. So thank you for sharing those. Jill, they're like, once again, we just so much good information. I would encourage people to go back and listen to this and the previous episode, just because there is so much good to learn here. But before we go, can you share with people how they can connect with you?
Yeah, my website is just my name, jillfreestone.com. And there's an email that you can reach out to me there, or on Instagram, you can message me there. It's Jill Freestone Coaching.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jill. I always learn a ton and find so much to reflect on. So I appreciate anytime you're here with me.
Thank you.
We'll see you later, everybody. Hey, we just wanted to thank you for spending part of your day here with us at Latter-day Life Coaches and being part of this conversation. Share this with your friends so that you can have a conversation with them on this topic as well. And as always, subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Have a good one, my friends.